Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Glyn in Monsterland by Kevin Philpott and Luisa Russo. And this book I have actually showcased on my old series last week on Indiegogo. I think I still have that series up, though I'm debating whether I should keep it up or not, just because it was an idea for this year, 2021, to kind of try and get more attention for the channel. And I don't necessarily know if people actually really liked it or found it very useful or not. I mean, if you found it useful and you're watching this, please let me know and drop a comment down below. But for the most part, I've kind of abandoned it just because, A, there wasn't always continuous books coming out on Indiegogo for a weekly format, even bi-weekly format. And then B, as a lot of you people are knowing, a lot of these campaigns are having a really hard time fulfilling. This one, however, did not. I remember this book coming out, I believe the campaign was either this year or maybe late last year. But here it is. It's actually fulfilled. According to the advertisement, 48-page graphic novel. It is Saddle Stitch. Thank you, God. Sorry, I've been having really bad luck with Perfect Bound books lately. And no, it's not because I beat them up. I hear you guys in the chat. I'm careful with my books sometimes. But thank God Kevin decided to go with saddle stitching. I prefer it. He also made the very wise decision not to make the paper too thick. As some of you guys know, if you ever bought, like, say, Cyberfrog or something like that, when you saddle stitch, there's only so much pages and so much thickness of pages that you can saddle stitch at one time. Generally speaking, if you have very thin paper like newsprint or magazine paper, you can go just to about 100 pages or so. But a lot of people tend to like the thicker pages because it's a lot nicer, in which case not recommended to go above 48, especially for this this type of stock right here. This feels actually pretty decent. It's substantial, but it's still easy to flip through the pages and whatnot. Anyhow, I went over the campaign for this comic book a while back. It actually is one of the few videos on my channel that got copyright struck because the trailer music for this damn comic book had copyrighted music. But anyhow, I remember thinking it was pretty interesting, just a bit on the expensive side. Around near the end of when the campaign was about to close down, I ended up jumping on the bandwagon. And in hindsight, for those of you who are thinking about the price was like the standard price, I think $25, and then I think it was actually standard shipping, even though Kevin Philpott and Luisa Russo are both in Europe. I believe Kevin Philpott is in Ireland and Luisa is in Italy. But it looks like I think they had some sort of deal going on with Critical Blast, and they found a way to, I think, fulfill it in the United States. I don't know if they printed in the United States. I think this is printed in the United Kingdom. So maybe they did like a big drop shipment, like a big pallet or I don't know, a big box or something like that over to Critical Blast, and then they fulfilled it in the United States at a much cheaper rate. But yeah, so this book, price $25. Again, very pricey, though the quality is excellent. I have no complaints about the quality of this book, and I do believe that this was one of the lower earning campaigns. I don't know if it was like 20K or how much that this campaign raised. It wasn't like big numbers, but it was enough for them to make the book, and it was as advertised, and it was delivered in a fairly timely manner. I don't know if this was like a year. I'm fairly certain this was under a year of delivery. Not 100% sure, but it seemed pretty darn quick between when I did the last week on Indiegogo for when the campaign kind of popped up, and near the end right here where I jumped on the bandwagon at the end and picked up a copy. But pretty cool cover right here. Kind of has all the characters and then sort of the split two down the middle, the opening right here. Very cool. You're gonna notice this artist right here very much enjoys drawing expressions, characters, etc. Not so much on the backgrounds, and it's not a bag on her. I'll go through the book in a bit, but spoiler-free review. So, Glyn in Monsterland is essentially a fantasy comedy. So if that's not your thing, be forewarned. I would give this book, so art, I would definitely am a fan of the art. I think Luisa is very, very good. She has like a semi-anime, semi-European style art. And it's very attractive on the eyes, and she does expressions and figures very well. She needs to work on backgrounds a little bit. She kind of, whenever there's a background, and she tries to do at least one background panel per page, which I think is a good rule of thumb. But I think there's a lot of instances in this book where I think big background shots with a little more detail could have helped out just a bit. Not a ton of detail. She doesn't have to render like crazy, but just a little more to get you into the world, I would say. Other than that, the only other complaint I have about her art is she is a bit... there's only one artist, so I'm assuming she's doing the coloring. The coloring can be a little rough on the eyes. It's a little too much use of glare effects and other sort of lighting effects here. And I would say this book actually would be better with, a little less coloring, glare nonsense. I think honestly, but again, take it from me, I'm kind of an old school comic book fan, so it might just be that I kind of like flat her coloring. But yeah, the coloring in here is a little too bright for my taste, especially in certain areas. Just take the lighting effects and tone it down a little bit. The other thing I would mention about her art is I think the action panels, when she does have action panels, needs a little bit of work, to have a little more impact. And every once in a while, there does feel like a disconnect between the dialogue and the art. Though I'm not going to necessarily put that on her. I get the feeling that this book was written in full script. So that would be more something for Kevin to work on. Now, the writing and the story. So I'll get to the negative first. The big criticism I have with Kevin Philpott's story here is I feel like a lot of impact points in the end and in the middle would have had much more weight if he would have spent a little more time building up the background and the characters in the beginning. He does a fun way of doing it, at least the basic premise of the book in the beginning, but I think the main character's motivations and background really doesn't get understood till basically the very end. And I think that's something that probably would have been caught by an editor, but knowing these kind of books, probably wasn't an editor. I'm not going to blame it. This book didn't make a ton of money on Indiegogo, so is what it is. But yeah, I think the motivations and the character sort of arc should be very clear from the beginning, and I think this book doesn't do a very good job of that. The other thing is, ostensibly, this is a fantasy comedy. At least that's how it's kind of marketed and how it's kind of written. And I would recommend to Kevin, tone down or eliminate all of the references, because there's a lot of reference humor. I think there's a Mount Doom reference humor and a bunch of other weird references, and it really messes with the tone of this book. It really makes it feel like it's trying too hard to be funny, when a lot of times basic situational humor, in fact, when Kevin does situational humor in this book, based on just the characters themselves, inherently what they are, ends up being much more effective than sort of his witty one-liners and weird sort of side references and stuff like that. I think, honestly, just focus on just driving the plot forward and then making humor where it's situationally convenient or useful or just good, right? And I think that's going to make for an overall better book next time around. The good about this book, it is mostly a complete story. So you're actually, a lot of stuff happens in this book. It's not 48 pages of just nothing, right? So and he does kind of leave a little bit at the end for you to get into future books if you end up really liking it. I will say I'm not really sure what the audience of this book is. Like, I don't know if Kevin is aiming this at kids, at teenagers, or adults. I think definitely that needs to be kind of narrowed down and focused on. You know, find your audience and, you know, appeal to them. I don't know who the audience of this book is, whether it's like anime fans or anime manga fans or more traditional comic book fans or whatnot. You know, I'm not sure really, or is it, you know, for European comic fans? Something for the creators to consider here. But anyhow, let's jump into this. So we open up and essentially the world gets introduced by this turnip dude. Again, another point, again, I'm going to make this because I say this at literally every modern comic book I ever review. So the only form of storytelling in this book is through dialogue balloons. It's 100% dialogue. Like virtually, well, I wouldn't say zero, but very, very minimal on narration or caption boxes. No thought through caption boxes and no thought balloons. So something for Kevin to consider is that there are other ways to kind of tell a story than just the standard dialogue balloon or lettering dialogue balloons. Something to think about for next time around, right? And because of that, there's kind of limits to what he can say and do when you're only using dialogue balloons, right? You know, but basically we get introduced to this world, and basically this world is a world of evil. So the good guys lost and the bad guys rule everything. And this witch is bringing her apprentice over to essentially the evil king to showcase her powers. And you get basically a gathering of baddies and whatnot. Things are kind of just given to you as is. It's not really given a full backstory here. Again, there's only so much you can dump about the world through dialogue balloons. That's kind of the problem with dialogue, right? You don't want to have exposition dumps, so you kind of just let things flow. So this young witch, Glyn, by the way, her master is Lucildor, and the king is... Actually, I forget what the name of the king is. It's just the king. Anyhow, she's supposed to show off her power to the king, but she ends up showing off the wrong type of magic. She shows off bright magic, where she's supposed to show off dark magic, and the king banishes her into the dungeon while embarrassing her witch master. So she ends up in the dungeon, and she basically meets a whole bunch of different monsters. So you got a mummy, you have a werewolf that looks like a Disney puppy right there. And then she also runs into this clown, a vampire, and then essentially Ghost Rider, the Sir Knight Ghost Rider. And they all come together to, she kind of gets this gang together because she wants to break out of this dungeon and be free, right? And meanwhile, sort of the background of this story, mainly the magic tree, which is this sort of MacGuffin thing that her master is after, is actually dead, which leads into a problem later on. And the rest of the gang goes sort of through the dungeon trying to escape. Eventually, they make it out of the dungeon, and they find pretty much all of the bad guys sleeping around, and they take their trinkets, basically looting stuff as they go. I like the expressions here. Like, this is good stuff by Luisa. Yeah, I like her art's pretty solid, man. She needs to do more backgrounds, but I dig the art. I really do. Except for when she goes crazy with the lighting effects. Then I don't dig it. This is overkill. Just a little overkill. Anyhow, they basically get into a big fight with all the baddies, and she's able to escape. And meanwhile, her master ends up basically usurping the king and taking over the castle. And the rest of them kind of get together and decide to create a band of heroes in a world of evil. Apparently very cute heroes is their claim to fame. And that's just riding a freaking unicorn. See what I mean? Like, I'm not really sure what this is for. I feel like it's for little kids. But it's not, the way the writing is done, it's not really, aimed at little kids all the time. So I'm not 100% sure where the audience is. And that's something that I think Kevin and Luisa can consider in the next one right there. But otherwise, a very straightforward story. Nothing really crazy or interesting here. I think this book is really held up by Luisa's art. And to be fair, the characterization, basically the premise of all these characters by Kevin Philpott is solid. I think the dialogue could use some work, and I think the humor could use some work. And I think more importantly, to kind of work on structure and fleshing things out a little bit more would be a good choice for the future. But overall, can't really complain. Would I back the next one? I don't really know. I mean, if it's the same team and I think Kevin gets himself an editor, I think I probably would back the next one. Though I don't know if he's going to be able to do that unless he's able to raise a lot more money than the first one, right? So we'll see. You know, who knows what happens in the future. Anyhow, let's get to the art. So when I was looking for reference for this gun, I think I was looking at her first costume, which I think is pretty cool. Let me go to that one. Yeah, I think I was referencing this the whole time, and she's basically in like a black purple or a dark purple, right? So again, Copics unfortunately end up being a lot brighter than other colors, so this ended up being way too bright, not enough contrast. I think if I would do it again, I'd probably mix actual blue and red, and then I think it would have ended up a lot darker overall. As far as like again, this is my style. This isn't Luisa's style. Hers is obviously much more cute than mine, though I did enlarge the eyes just because I thought that to me, when I think of the character, I think of the eyes really. In general, when you look at the visual design of this character, it really is the eyes that kind of make the character work, right? And honestly, it's really what, yeah, see, case in point, right? The eyes are kind of what make this style work very well. So even though it's not naturally my way to make eyes that large, I did make them a little larger than usual just because I felt like it was appropriate for the style. Anyhow, guys, that's the video. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notification. If you got any comments on Glyn in Monsterland or my art, leave it down below, and I will see you next time.